Together, we are unlocking potential. Welcome to this episode from Red Door Pediatric Therapy, where we share stories and strategies of functional, behavioral, emotional, and social development in children today. We're glad you're here, and we can't wait to get started.
Okay, hi everybody. Welcome back to our Red Door podcast, Unlocking Potential. I'm your host for season 2, Stephanie Schneider. Great to have you all with us. Today, we are going to talk about tantrums. I think a lot of us who are parents and who work in the pediatric clinic setting deal with this or have talked about families about this. And I think tantrums is the word that a lot of us associate with these kind of negative behaviors that we're seeing from kids. But we're going to talk about self-regulation too, because that is kind of the professional term that comes to mind when we talk about tantrums with our kids. So I have a special guest today. Heather Weisbeck is an occupational therapist at Red Door. She's been with us around 10 years, so is a great expert on all things self-regulation. She's a mom of 4, so has personal experience with this as well. So we're just so happy to have her here today. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So in preparing for our conversation today, I just did some Googling because I know as parents, we go straight to the internet when we have questions or concerns with our kids, whether that's good, bad, or otherwise. We oftentimes start there. So I'm just going to throw Google definition of self-regulation at you because I think for parents, when they start maybe engaging with some therapy for their kids or even just questioning about behaviors and the word we're going to use it today, tantrums. Self-regulation comes up a lot in research and articles, but maybe that's a little bit of jargon for people with less experience. So let's talk about self-regulation. Here's the definition that I got, and I just kind of want to know your impression if you sort of agree or want to add to it. So self-regulation, the ability to manage and controls one's emotions, thoughts, behaviors, and actions in different situations, especially in the face of challenges or emotional triggers. Thoughts about that explanation? That's sort of what we're talking about today?
Yep, I feel like that pretty much sums it up. Just how we regulate from kids to adults to any age in, like they said, a challenge situation.
Okay, awesome. That's great. So having that kind of context with us, I want to ask you first as an occupational therapist and your expertise, how do you guys get involved with people maybe struggling with this as an occupational therapist? What is your role with kids who are maybe struggling in this area? Tell us what you do. I think not a lot of people when they get started either know the difference between different providers, including an occupational therapist.
Yeah, so OT helps out with a lot of self-reg because when we're not regulated, it can affect a lot of our daily living activities. And so OT, occupational therapy, we help with activities of daily living. So we help with just like, starting your routine and sequencing that morning routine, eating, showering. We also do more of the higher level functioning skills like cooking and cleaning. And so if we're not regulated during those situations or at school and even social, those situations can be really hard. So being able to regulate, we can teach kids, adults, or anyone different kind of tools to help regulate. And so they can be independent or successful in those certain areas.
Such a great explanation. And that just makes me think of the part that says, especially in the face of challenging or emotional triggers, when things get hard. And as you're, a kid going through development, you're learning new stuff all the time, how to tie your shoes, how to brush your teeth, sequencing tasks, all of that. So when things get challenging and tough, then how do I manage that frustration? So my next question, follow-up question to that is the why. Why do kids have a hard time regulating themselves? What are maybe some potential triggers for them to not be able to regulate their own emotions in a moment of frustration? why do these things happen for them?
I mean, I think this will happen to. Some kids, of course, that have a little more tricky with sensory processing, just more sounds might irritate them, or more light, or different environment things that it can impact their regulation.
Yeah. And kids are tough because they can't tell you, right? It's like they know they feel yucky. So then we see their reaction, these behaviors or their tantrums. And let's talk about, like, we're using the term tantrum, but like, what does a tantrum look like? I have 3 kids. They're currently 9, 7, and just turned 6. My 2 oldest are girls, and then my youngest is a little boy. And I guess I can't say I had a ton of personal experience with tantrums with the girls, but Henry was a totally different ball game in terms of that. When he got, dysregulated, or whatever the term would be, he just kind of felt yucky in his skin for whatever reason. And in the moment, if I asked him, he couldn't tell me, right? Like, as a parent, you want to help them to calm down right away. And I felt like my reaction was, what do you need? Tell mommy what's bothering you. Why are you upset? And instead it was just, hollering, crying. He would throw things. He, in his worst tantrums, would push over our chairs at the counter, push the rug over, our timeout rug. Like, he just got really physically kind of aggressive, which was just totally new. And I think when you're a therapist, you put your therapist head on, but when you're a mom and it's your own kid, I mean, I just had a physical reaction, like I got sweaty, and it's like, what is this? This is just new.
Right.
And he can't articulate that back. He couldn't tell me what was wrong. And I was just, grasping for ways to help him calm down, because he obviously wasn't feeling good in his own skin. So, from your point of view and what you've seen, is that kind of typical as a meltdown? Or I guess meltdown is another term I think that parents say a lot to us. Like, tantrums, is that kind of what makes it a tantrum, or what would you describe a tantrum to be or look like?
Right. I think that is one example of one. They can be, less severe or more severe. Some can just kind of shut down and, lay on the ground and just pout, or they can lay on the ground, start kicking and screaming. There's kind of a range of tantrums. And I feel like, like I said, every kid is different too. And every episode might be different too. Like, one kid might have a little tantrum, and then the next thing can make a big tantrum. So it kind of depend on the situation.
Okay. And, as I tried to really, be attentive of like potential triggers, or maybe after the fact when he was calmer, connecting and trying to figure out why he spiraled. And sometimes I felt like I had no idea, but other times it really came down to just like his basic needs. Like, he was hot even if he got overheated, or if I knew he was hungry, or sometimes if he hadn't had a number 2 that day. I mean, sometimes I felt like maybe it was even that. Those, of course, were my speculations, but it felt like those basic needs would even kind of trigger him. Is that common or a factor too?
For sure. I think that's the most important thing when you do have a dysregulated kid, to look at those basic needs, because those things we can more control as well. As being a mom or being a parent, they can be like, okay, let's get him a snack. Let's try to get him to go to the bathroom. Let's cool him down. Those are easier tools to kind of help him regulate.
Okay. I'm going to throw some stats at you and see if you agree from your experience. And talking about boys versus girls, is there any, to your knowledge, difference with boys and girls in the amount of tantrums that they have? Are boys more likely to tantrum or girls, or is it pretty even Steven, would you say?
Personal experience, I feel like both my boys are older, they're 6 and almost 5. And then my 2 girls are 3 and just 4 months. But between my older boys and my younger girl, I feel like they're a horse piece. I feel like it can happen to either. I feel like my younger girl has seen more their older brothers, and just she's a little easier as far as to regulate, in my opinion, but that's interesting that your youngest is harder for you, so I always thought maybe the younger ones are going to follow their older siblings. So I don't think I would say it would be more girls than boys. at this time.
Okay, well, that's good to know. And then as far as tantrums being, part of typical development, from what I understand, that, you can sort of expect it, and every kid's a little bit different as far as how intense they are or how long lasting they are. But are tantrums, or kind of this difficulty with self-regulation, part of typical development? And should kids kind of evolve to a place where they can regulate better on their own? Are there ages to kind of keep an eye out for this?
I'd say they are typical tantrums and developmental, but it doesn't mean that you should just keep letting them go and let them have their way or let them keep tantruming. We want to, from my opinion, and just from being an OT, you want to start it at a young age of starting to address these tantrums. One, so they don't continue a habit of them. And you just want to lay down kind of the rules that you have for your home and just the environments, so they kind of know the expectations, so then they can have more successful growing up and kind of
yeah that's great advice. Kind of let's kind of segue there. Like, what can moms do to help set our kids up for success and sort of avoid tantrums if we sort of start to identify maybe some triggers or things that we know potentially can be triggering, even some just, things we can change in our home, or sort of how we present things that we maybe know are triggers. I think, sometimes when the kids are at my house, tablets are sort of like a trigger. When can they have, how long can they have them, and things like that. So sometimes even just talking about it makes somebody upset, So what advice do you have for us at home just to kind of help lessen or avoid the tantrum or meltdown altogether? How can we help our kids with that?
I would say consistency is a big tool. Being consistent within just a time frame, and also if you have, two parents at home, being consistent between the two of you, because if one parent is letting them do something and the other parent's not, they're not gonna, follow through. So consistency is the key. Also, just giving them expectations, like I said before. Like showing these are the rules, and then if we don't follow them, there's going to be a consequence, and being consistent with that consequence and finding ones that are meaningful to your child, so then they are going to follow through more so as well.
That's great advice. And I've done some of that with Henry, and I have seen a way positive difference with him. And then when I feel like it's working and I'm successful, I can definitely slack off on that routine or that consistency, because I think things are going good. I'm like, oh, things are so good. He's not, having these meltdowns anymore. I don't think I have to do that anymore. And the minute I stop, it's just like very slowly, it like creeps back into our lives. And it takes me a minute to think, now, why is this happening again? And it's like, oh, duh, you changed that support. That was really helpful.
Right.
And to get back on track. That's such great advice. And to have parents and caregivers all on the same page so that there is consistency for the child. That makes great sense. One more question before we wrap up today. What about seeking professional help? Occupational therapists are obviously great resources for kids who maybe are having really intense meltdowns, and maybe you try some of these things at home and maybe you don't see a great outcome like I've seen in my home, or it just goes on longer than you expect it to do. When should we maybe call, an occupational therapist or talk to our pediatrician about it? Are there any kind of indicators for getting a little bit of help with it?
I think it depends on the age. Of course, when they're younger, they're going to push your buttons more, because especially around that 2 to 3 age, they are trying to be more independent. They're going to try to get their way more. So, if it's that time, I would say a few months where you're just kind of nothing's working, definitely call in. And when they're older, I feel like sooner, because one, they're older, so we got to get them in faster to get rid of that habit of trying to, always have their way or whatever the case is. So I think whenever you're not comfortable, or the ADLs or their overall just performance is not doing well, call. I mean, it doesn't hurt to call and start getting help. The sooner the better, I guess.
That's great advice. And your point about as they age, because it really affects the family dynamic, even with little ones like siblings around, you kind of wonder what to do with them while this child is, going through this. And as they age, it just probably impacts the family even more and all their success and their other environments, school and with friends and all of that. Well, Heather Weisbeck, occupational therapist with Red Door Pediatric Therapy. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your, not only your professional advice and experience, but also personal. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, that's all we have today. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for unlocking potential with us. And a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Unlocking Potential is a production of Red Door Pediatric Therapy with clinics in Fargo, Bismarck, Grand Forks, Minot, and Beulah. Learn more and book your free screening at reddoorpediatric.com.